Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Tips Over Tea. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Akita. We have been friends for a while, and talking. We've had conversations about mental health, and with May being a Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought it would be awesome to just invite her to the show because she's got a wealth of knowledge and it'd just be a good conversation to just bring awareness. So, Akita, thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait to have this conversation.
Same. We're excited and just shout out to you really contributing to raising awareness here. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it because I think although it's the right month for it, I think people should be discussing this every month, every day.
Absolutely. I have a lot of background noise, so I'm gonna keep, and I forgot to move me over. So I'll keep pausing. Um, muting my mic when you speak just because of my background noise. But
Sure.
awesome. So I just wanna let's just start with as a person who battles mental health, like you would think these days it wouldn't still be a stigma and a fear around seeking help. But what do you think? Um, what are some things that someone can just like put in their mind that it is okay to seek help, or you know, like where would one start without feeling that need to not start at all? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely, absolutely. So, the first thing I'll say is that I'm going to speak from my perspective, right? As someone who has battled successfully with depression for quite some time and who has several members of my immediate family and several friends who battle with mental health issues. And quite frankly, I think the first thing you do is you take the labels off because to one degree or another, everyone has some type of mental health concern that they're trying to deal with. And an example of that would be if you suffer from anxiety, right? Or if you're overstressed at work or with family or what have you, that's a mental health issue. So I think the first thing is you take the labels off. And then I think the second thing is you realize everyone has some kind of mental issue that they are successfully battling or preparing to successfully battle, right? Because it's all in your mindset. I think when people associate things with extremes and have converse, and I think that's a part of what we're trying to normalize is not doing that. Just because someone says, hey, I'm struggling with depression doesn't mean they're at home in fetal position. It means that they had a tough week or they were overwhelmed, and that's okay. And I think culturally, specifically within the African American community, because that's what I can speak to, and the African community, which is another community that I can speak to, because I was raised in Zimbabwe and Kenya. And so a large part of my upbringing was there. Those aren't communities where people typically are referred to anything other than prayer. It's like you could just pray it away. And while prayer is amazing, depending on what your spiritual beliefs are, some things you're going to need a little bit more support. So then the notion should be prayer and, right? And so if you're at that prayer and place, then that's when we want to start looking at professional assistance. And sometimes you're at that place not due to any shortcoming of your own, but you're there because maybe it's a private issue. You're there because maybe whatever you're struggling with, no one in your sphere of love, your sphere of influence has experience with that. Or maybe you just want to talk to an unbiased party that's not going to bring preconceived notions of you to the conversation because you're trying to become somebody new or something new or a new version or a new level of yourself. And all of those are, to me, perfectly acceptable reasons. I think I'd shared this with you. My dad passed in 2019, and I really didn't feel like I didn't have anyone in my circle at that time except for one person who had had a parent pass. And so I was dealing with both grief and depression at that time, which are two normal reactions to the loss of someone that you love in your life. And I just, for me, I wanted to talk to someone because I didn't feel like anyone in my circle had experience. A lot of times people will lean in and they'll say, "Oh, I get it." But like if you've never lost a parent, you know, while I appreciate your empathy and your sympathy, you don't get it because you don't have any lived experience with that. So like that's what I'd say like top of mind. What
I
about you? Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, I just I loved a lot of what you said. I love that you mentioned a lot of times when we think mental health, we're thinking extremes, right? We're not considering that mental health means a healthy mind. like like it's just a healthy mind. You you do battle things that would be considered mental health because it's in the mind, right? Like you said, anxiety, stress, depression, all that stuff starts in the mind. So I love that you brought that point up. And I also love that you brought up, and I've said this too, because people are like, just reach out to someone. I'm like, you can't just reach out to
Oh,
someone. Like, you
no,
got to know who is in your circle and who you're talking to and who can handle what you're dealing with or not,
that's
because
it.
it can make it worse, right? It could inadvertently.
Yep, I agree. I also think the danger with the just reach out to someone, even from a professional perspective, a lot of us are seeking culturally sensitive care, right? And unfortunately, people don't want to acknowledge we do have a different lived experience as people of color, right? And specifically as multiracial or Black people of color, we have differences in our lived experience. Like I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and she is a beautiful, darker skinned queen. We have different lived experiences, right? There's a different experience between a Niger queen and myself, right? And so it depends on the issue, but you may need specific support, like someone who can relate to your culture, someone who can relate to, it's not really that my parents disapprove. This is a cultural thing that's going to come up at every engagement and so like, how do I grapple with that? And so I think that's another reason why people can't just reach out, because depending on the issue, it may be triggering, right, for a family member. Or also, you could just need someone who has that shared lived experience with you so they know, oh, I get it. Your parent wanted you to be a doctor and you're a rapper. Yeah, no, that's not gonna, let's talk about that. You know what I mean? Let's figure out like how we can do something there. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think one, it's at the end of the day, for me, it's about giving myself permission to live my best life. And permission to live my best life means that I, Akita, am going to have to do some different things from everyone else. So it's not about comparative thinking. Like, and also the reality is you really don't know what your friends are doing, right? Like, not everyone's going to be transparent about their mental health journey, just like not everyone's going to be transparent about their fitness journey, right? Like, those are all personal preferences. So at the end of the day, it's really about when you're alone with you, what are you doing to live your best life? Like, how are you putting that in action? Something else that I'll share with you that happened with to me was when my dad passed away. I leaned into meditation in a way that I had never leaned into it before. And um it was like my saving grace, like, and out of that was my personal pathway to like therapy was meditation. All these things kept coming up in my meditation sessions. I would journal about them, and I was like, man, I want to understand these things. I want to know, like, is this a normal feeling? Because of my background, in my particular family, I didn't have anyone that I could kind of go to and talk to, because therapy and those kinds of conversations aren't a thing. Like, we're in my family, like my dad waited until he knew he only had a certain amount of time to live before coming to the table with certain truths, right? Like, that's the background that I came from. It was like, look, I'm going to be here for 12 more days. There's some things you should know. And I'm like, whoa, buddy, whoa, whoa. You know what I mean? And so then you're kind of trying to process that. So I would also just say it's okay too if your journey's different. Maybe your pathway to therapy is yoga. Maybe it ends at yoga. Maybe it begins with journaling and ends at journaling. But the bottom line is it producing the results? And for me, results are energy. Like, when you are alone with you and there's no need for pretense or masks, as the poet Paul Laurence Dunbar said, right? There's no need for any of that. Are you at peace with you? And if the answer is your time with you feels good, then you're doing what you need to do. But when you're alone, if things are popping up, and you know when that's happening in your personal space, like, you can lie to everybody else, but you cannot lie to yourself. So when you're alone, if things are popping up, you need to be honest about that and figure out, are you cool staying in that season? Like, are you cool with that? Or do you have the boldness to give yourself permission to get better and experience a better life? Because for some of us, we're going to be the first people in our families who seek therapy. We're going to be the first. And to me, I kind of negate that. I don't know how you feel about it, but I equate that to generational curse breaking, depending on what people's spiritual practices are. I can't say that people in my family successfully used therapy to get to the next level, right? They didn't. They used it maybe 1 or 2 sessions and they were like, okay, this is not working, we're out. And things that took 20 years to occur can't be fixed in 2 sessions, in my opinion.
Yeah, you said a couple of things that I wanted to touch on about how like your father waited until he was about gone and then he shared, right?
You're
Like
5 minutes on the deathbed, like, just come closer. There's some things I want to tell you. No, bro, keep that, sir. Keep that.
right, but I'm like, if you do give yourself that permission to be bold, like, and if you have children
Ooh,
or people that you're influencing, like, imagine the effect, the impact that you can have on that child's life. So I love that you brought that up, and I love that you mentioned if you're alone with yourself and you're good, then you're doing what you need to do.
period.
If not, are you I love that you said, "Are you okay with being that way that you are in that season?" Because it is absolutely your choice, right? Like, you can choose to just you're not ready to face some of the things that you know that you need to face.
Yep.
Also totally okay.
Yep.
If it's impacting your way of life, though, I would caution to maybe take some baby steps at least
Mhm.
because it can spiral the other direction if you're not doing something to pull you forward. But I love that you mentioned give yourself permission to figure out like what do you want, where do you want to go, do you want to be bold and step forward, do you want to just be cautious to stay here for right now? But just I do want to say you can survive it.
Part.
It's scary, but you can survive it.
I also think like today we live in an age where so many people are transparent about their journeys that not only can you survive it, but like if you're afraid right now, get on the Instagram, use a hashtag for what you feel like you're dealing with. If it's overcoming depression, or if it's learning about bipolar, or if it's anything, social anxiety, or if it's weight loss, or if it's, whatever, emotional eating, right? There's a hashtag for that. And you can honestly find your community, and a community that are dealing with it, a community that successfully dealt with it, and use those stories to kind of transform your own thinking about your abilities to be able to move forward. One of the things I'll say from my particular experience, are two things actually. One is, after my dad died, I started a practice called radical self-honesty, right? And I call it a practice because I receive now that not everyone lives that way, right? Like, that's why I think some people are like, Akita, wow, you're really direct. I don't have time to waste. Like, when my dad died, I realized that energy can be gone just like that, and all the tomorrows you think you have, they're not guaranteed. And so what that caused me to do was just get to a place of radical self-honesty. I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that, right? And I think most people need a life event, and I'm most people in this instance, need a life event to occur. And then we respond to that life event. But the beautiful thing about life is you don't have to be me. You don't have to wait for a life event. You can literally right now say, you know what, wow, maybe I shouldn't have had those 4 tubs of Haagen Dazs. That didn't feel good afterwards, right? And okay, so why am I doing that? And then get the treatment and the plan that you need to feel better. So I would just tell people, like, one, look at your community. Two, you don't have to wait for a life event like I did and like many other people did. You can literally say, today I want to tackle this. And then the other thing that I would just caution people is that it's okay if your journey, um and I don't know the nice way to say this, and I don't necessarily know that there is a nice way, but it's okay if your journey is you're trying to wait for the pain to get to a certain place. But even in that, you don't have to. So, like, I think this is a great time to just be mindful. You don't have to wait for the pain of your life to get to a certain place for you to say, oh, I don't want to experience anymore. You literally right now can say, I don't like the way that feels, because we know when we're in pain. We know when things are, you know what I mean? Like, but sometimes we're waiting, like, okay, I'm just going to give it 17 more chances. Like, I had a relationship in my family that was really causing me to emotionally eat, right? And with this particular family member, I was like, well, I'm just going to give it 17 more chances. Truly, on the 18th time, something is going to change. And when we love people, it gets tricky, right? Because that's one of the definitions of love, is that you hope, you believe, you're rooting for but the reality is you got to hope and believe for yourself too. And after experiencing like a big betrayal with this person, and I personally believe that was my ancestors going, girl, you need help. If we continue to let you do this, you just gonna keep turning the cheek left and right. So we're gonna have to leap in there and just remove this from your life. And they did, and I'm very grateful that they know me that well, that they can just say, look, you just keep giving them chances, and you got to stop. You got to stop. But once that occurred, and I had that again, that alone time, I realized, wow, this wasn't once or twice. This was like 18 times. And it was horrifying. Like, I was just like, how did I let this person do this 18 times? But we just, that was another thing I wanted to address. Like, and so I met with a therapist and started talking about, like, man, what's happening here? Why am I giving people 20 chances when they deserved one or two? And like, let me bring it there. And what I learned from my particular journey was just, you're always going to be confronting these childhood issues, right? And as a child, I was abandoned, right? And so like one of the worst things I can envision doing to someone else is abandoning them. And what my therapist helped me understand is that it's not about you taking ownership for anyone else's actions. It's about you taking ownership for you. That's that mental health piece. So, like, now I have a framework, and I didn't get that framework as a child, but I got that framework as an adult to say, okay, this is Akita's life code. And it doesn't mean I won't give you a chance, but Akita doesn't dish out 18 chances anymore the way she used to, because that's ridiculous. Like, why am I out here doing it? And it doesn't matter if you're my cousin and we used to swing on the jumbo gym together, or what. It doesn't matter. You are grown now, and you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? And so it was about taking accountability. And I feel like that's the last thing I'll say on that, is like, your journey begins when you decide to be accountable. And I know there are instances where people are like, Akita, how can I be accountable? Like, I had this conversation at work this past week. We were having similar health-based conversations, and we were talking with people who had been sex workers and people who had been through real things. And so someone who has that experience is probably like, well, what do you mean? You want me to take accountability? I can't take accountability. And the thing is, I'm not asking you to take accountability for what was done to you. I'm asking you to take accountability for where you'd like to be now and tomorrow.
Yep.
Right. And I
Yep.
think that's critical, because
Yep.
that, at least for me, that was critical on my journey, to say, I can't be accountable for all these things that broken people did to me. I can, though, be accountable for my life right now. And that's a journey. It's not like it's a switch. And it's like, all right, accountability. It doesn't quite, at least for me, it didn't work that way.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. I want to touch on a couple of things you mentioned. Um, when if you're challenged right now, use the hashtags and look for your community. I would say make sure when you find that community that you're feeling uplifted, and they're not circling in that same down, like, you know what I mean? They like make sure they're focused on the right things.
Absolutely, because if you're looking for a solution, hopefully you're not looking for people who are echoing what you feel.
Yeah.
You're, as I was saying, who can show you the full journey, right? You're looking for people who've been through it, like who they're in at another level. You don't just want to get caught in that cycle of like commiseration, right? Like, you're not looking for the, yup, that happened to me. And hear me. At first, though, you may need a little bit of that. You may need, because I know from my journey, I needed to know that there were other people who had been through what I had been through. And I watched one or two videos, and I was like, okay, you do you too. And then I kept going through the channel, and I was like, okay, cool. You need a therapist. You still there. Moving on. You know what I mean? And so you continue until you find the energy. It's just like finding a church home or a meditation center or an ashram. It's about the energy. You'll know when you're in the space that feels uplifting and safe to you. And that's hopefully the journey. Like, to me, health is about getting to the next level, not about staying where you are or going deeper into a feeling that you don't need to experience without a professional steward, right? Because, like, for people who've been through really traumatic situations, sometimes you need a steward, like, to steward you through that journey, because going back to those triggering moments can be a lot, like, alone. And so for something like that, you don't want to like dive into the hole of triggering emotions alone, but it is good to know that there are people who unfortunately have also been through what you've been through and have come out on the other side. And so that's a great point. Like, you should be looking for that. That's what I was looking for. That's what I would, encourage people to find. And again, there's nothing wrong with that first If you do, though, need to know that you're not the only one, because I think we skip over that step a lot of times. And for me, that was important in my healing journey. I was not the first person to lose a parent, right? I was not the first person to have to figure out abandonment issues. I was not the first person to struggle with emotional eating. And so, no, once I saw that, that was great. But then I wanted to get to, okay, so who's transformed from this? Right? Like, where are those people? And so I couldn't agree with you more, Nikki. Like, if you need to start there for 1, 2 posts, I'm not mad at you. But just 1 week later, let's not still find you reviewing the same post. You should definitely be taking it to another level.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another point that you brought up is boundaries, to protect your mental health with your family member who was toxic. And
Oh,
I
which one? Which one? Which one? Which
just the one that you mentioned about that you went like 18
love
times.
the family? I really do, and that's okay too. People should know that it's okay if you got to disconnect from folks you love. You can love people from afar.
Yep. Yep. And it's important to do that. And if you feel just like how you were like, why do I keep trying? Why do I keep doing this? And you get to the bottom of it with help.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people feel guilty for setting boundaries for themselves or for other people. And then they overstep their own boundaries, and then they get
Woo!
frustrated when people violate their boundaries that they don't know exist because you're not showing that you have them. So I like that you brought that up too. Like sometimes even blood family you have to love from afar just to save yourself, because when you save yourself you're saving the world. When you raise, I say this all the time, you raise your vibration, you raise the vibration of the planet, right? Because energy is transferable. You've noticed like attracts like. So
All the time, for better or for worse, people, for better or for worse. Well, one of the things, and I don't often I don't often loop like celebrities into my conversations for various reasons, but I do want to be accurate to the story. There were two stories that I came across online, and one was um there was a time that Lauren London, who's an actress, was struggling with her weight, and it was had to do with her pregnancy and all of that, but the internet was savage. The internet was savage. And I'm laughing because people are wild. On the internet, it's like some people take on these personalities, and then you meet them and you find out that they're the chair of the deacon board or something like that, and you're like, what? I wouldn't have taken that from your commentary. But people were really coming for her, on this weight loss thing, and forcing her, like, you should be snapping back like everybody else in 2 days. You should snap back, which is crazy. But she said something when she did finally address it. She said, my job in life and my concern in life is for me to be at peace with me, not to be at peace with the world. And while everybody else may want to snap back and, my revenge body in 12 weeks, if that's the adventure you want to go on, have at it, do you. But as for me and my household, I'm going to do it in my own time. And eventually she did. I mean, she looked amazing. But my point is, to support what you were saying, exactly. It wasn't about anybody else's timeline. It was about setting boundaries on who was even welcome to comment on that personal space, right? And determining like what doing you really looks like, because I think a lot of people use that kind of language, but when you get to the nitty gritty, they don't really know what doing them is. Doing them is actually a collection of doing others, and that's a problem because you don't feel good about yourself. And I will share this, as someone who has had to cut off every single blood relative that I have, that I grew up with the exception of two or three of my cousins. I'm here for cutting your family off. I just want to say that. I'm here. And I know people don't like to talk about that, but we all have to stop pretending to be the Huxtables, because it's not real. And more importantly, and this is what I found in my living experience, not only is it not real, when you are a fraud and you don't own the actual lived experience that you were gifted, you cannot shift the atmospheres you were meant to shift because you're not showing up as yourself.
I
You know?
yes.
And when I got a hold of that thing, I don't know, that transformed me. And also when I realized that if something else was required of me for me to fit into a space, that wasn't my space to fit into,
Hmm.
right? That's the other thing we don't want to receive, is that you're given a story. That story comes with consequences. It also comes with blessings, and sometimes rejection is protection. So if you need the perfect family and the perfect this and the perfect that to walk through that door probably isn't meant for you. So don't walk through it, because it wouldn't be you walking through it anyway if you have to change yourself and do all of this craziness to get there. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in letting releasing people to their best destiny once they've kind of showed you what life decisions they are choosing to make as adults, right? You have to then, release them to their best destiny, whatever that may be.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it takes what you mentioned earlier, being honest with yourself. That is, it's so interesting because I had to get to that place too. Like being honest with myself, like who am I? Like there's nobody, there's just me here right here. So really understanding, and you mentioned that too, kind of like really you don't know what doing you is until you're completely honest with yourself and figuring out what you want, right? So I love that you brought that up too. And our time is like getting close. But the biggest thing in this is what I talk about, because it doesn't what happens, let's see, how do I want to say this? When I used to, the phrase it is what it is I used to hate that phrase because I felt like it negated how I was feeling. But
Mm,
when you take emotion out of it and just look at the situation is what it is. What are you going to do from this point forward? So I love that you brought that up, because I'm always thinking like that, because it's not that we're diminishing what you've been through, how you feel, all of the emotions and all that. At some point you have to get to, okay, how do I want to feel and what is it going to take for me to get to that point, right? That is how you take responsibility. Sometimes it may have a little bit of meds involved, sometimes it doesn't. There's no shame. It's just like how, when you take care of you, you're taking care of the planet. And so that's, I love that you also brought that up. It's like, what do I do from this point forward? I cannot take responsibility for other people's stuff and the way things happened. And yeah, so
this may sound wild, but one of the other things, like when my dad passed away, I really started looking at my life as my queendom. And I always encourage both men and women and non-binary people to look at their spaces as royal sacred spaces. And if you yourself are a masterpiece, and if you yourself are your best work of art, what are you doing, right, to enliven that space? And more importantly, what do you need, right? And I think when you do that, it becomes, at least for me, because you used a word that I think a lot of people may find heavy. And I know initially when I began my journey, girl, that was too much adulting for me. You using big words like responsibility. I was like, ooh, girl, I already have too many responsibilities. I don't need that. But what I came to when I started looking at it as an adventure, right? When I started looking at it as, oh, I get to create this queendom, and because I'm a more creative personality, right? Like that's where my personality leans. So when it became that, instead of like this heavy responsibility, this deep traumas I have to dig into my soul, like when it stopped being that, and it became like, oh, huh, aromatherapy in the morning makes me feel better. Oh, color therapy in my life, in my house, in my decor, it brings on a certain feeling. Oh, I don't like it when so and so visits. Access denied. Okay, I do like going over here, and it became fun and playful and creative. And what I realized over a period of time is I was learning how to take care of me better. And then at a certain point, when my inner and my personal reached a certain point, I knew I needed help, a coach or somebody else to get me to that next level. And the last thing that I'll say is, you embark upon this journey, anybody, get ready for people to be mad. People get big mad when you start doing you. Okay. Don't think, and no, we don't talk about that. We talk about you're going to feel better, you're going to heal, but nobody says, and you're going to have haters. There are people that are actually going to be mad that you are feeling better, looking better, your skin is glowing, you're on the beach somewhere taking a vacation for the first time in 10 years. Somebody's going to be bitter. And the reality is that has nothing to do with you.
yeah, they're mad at themselves for not doing what you're doing, for not taking the steps necessary to do what they need to do to get to where they want to go. But they don't realize that that's what's going on. So yes, recognize projection and recognize that, and that goes back to you. Like if you got to cut people off, you got to cut people off. So
And I hate to say this, you're actually not cutting them off. You're
yeah,
releasing their best destiny. Once you say, this is what I need for my life to be optimal, and then you look around and say, okay, this is what aligns with that. You really, only thing you're doing is honoring you. This is not like a proactive war against anyone else. You're just kind of saying, hey, I'm going to release. And I say that to people. I'll be like, I'm going to just release you to your best destiny. And I'm going to, roll out. And you'd be amazed that causes people to do some self-reflection in some instances, and other souls, sayonara, and it's all okay. All the doors are okay as long as the end result is you getting better. And that's the thing I want to leave folks who may be paying attention to this conversation with, is just get better. Like you can have a better tomorrow and a better the next day. It doesn't have to be a switch.
yeah, I love it. I love it, and I love that new way of saying that. Release you to your best destiny, because it isn't personal, right?
But mean it, because sometimes we say stuff like that, at least if you're snarky like me, and there's a little shade on it, the little shade. When I say it, I promise you, like I was talking to my best friend about this the other day, and he said to me, he was like, Akita, the wild thing about you is you actually mean it. Like if you met someone and they had become a millionaire, you'd be like, I see you, look at you in your best destiny. I wouldn't feel any kind of way, because I was never trying to flex on you. It was never about you. It really was about saying, dang, I don't think I'm the right soul to serve this friendship or whatever. We have this knowing of each other, whatever it is. So I release you. So I would just say that, like, don't be shady with it. Like, say it when you mean it. That's all I'm going to say. Just, it's like when people say, well, you just be blessed. And they don't mean that. They ain't praying for you. They not. It's not true.
Facts. I love it. Love it. Love it. Awesome. This has been a beautiful conversation. I really enjoyed everything you shared. Some really great tips and nuggets throughout the whole thing. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward, because we're going to do a couple more parts, right? Because mental health is not just in home, it's at work, it's as a caretaker, all that. So
Don't
yeah.
put the streets. It's everywhere, girl. It's at work. It's when you go to the grocery store, that bad customer service. Yes. Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. If you tuned in live or you're catching this later, I know I don't hope I know you got some really good nuggets. Feel free to share this with someone you think could benefit from it, and make sure you're subscribed so you can know whenever we go live or upload a new video. And until next time, ciao for now.